Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us on our live stream, continuing coverage of prepping for the monsoon. I'm Sherry Swensk.
I'm Nathan Tannenbaum. We're on LasVegasNow.com as well as the 8 News Now Facebook page. Before we get to our guests, we want to encourage you to join us with any questions or comments you might have as we go along. Sherry?
Yeah, we're monitoring our Facebook page, so please let us hear from you. And we want to get right to our guest this morning, who's taken time out of his busy schedule. This is Sergeant Chris LeBlanc with Metro Search and Rescue, here to talk about emergency rescues when people are in peril and are in need of getting out of very dangerous situations like flash floods and other situations. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for being with us.
Yes, Great to see you.
Yeah, this is meant to be kind of an informal conversation, but we're talking about some very dangerous situations.
Well, we've shown the videos of some folks being rescued, and I know that's what some of what somebody from Metro does. Maybe you not you particularly, but search and rescue is a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, what's that situation like? And we're showing video of people being stranded. Now, we know the fire department does swift water on the ground, but Metro handles the air. So talk about that.
Yeah, so fire department, we have a great working relationship with them, and they handle a lot of the swift water rescues within the flood channels, within the within the inner city. And then what we're tasked with is out in the rural environment, Red Rock, Mount Charleston, and so forth. So what they offer is the ground response, and in most situations what we'll offer is an aerial coverage, if you will. What that can be comprised of is something like our air unit on patrol actually spotting these victims floating down the flood channels, or us actually responding with the helicopter and conducting hoists.
And there have been years when we've had monumental catastrophic flood events, like 2003, when we saw people, just like we're seeing right there, that had to be rescued from the tops of their cars. And so Metro will come in that situation. Talk about that experience. What's it like encountering a victim that must be in shock or just in so much fear in that situation?
Yeah, so it's something like most folks don't ever encounter something like this. This is us encountering them on their worst time. So if you do find yourself in this situation, what you want to do is remain calm. Don't approach the rescuer or try to self-rescue. Call 911 and you'll have emergency responders that respond in the appropriate fashion. So here what you see is actually one of our HH-1H helicopters conducting a hoist rescue in town during one of those flood incidents.
You sound so matter-of-fact about it, Chris. It's a big deal, man.
It's scary.
Well, I mean,
it's what you guys do.
It's what we do, no different than what you guys do here. So.
But you've rescued people from like Red Rock or Mount Charleston, you personally?
Yeah, so primarily where we operate at is in the mountainous or desert environments on the outskirts of the valley in the rural areas. Red Rock, number one, and then a close second is Mount Charleston is usually where we get the majority of our rescues.
So you're rescuing people from very precarious situations. I mean, that woman right there in 2003, completely overwhelmed. She was in shock. We've heard interviews with her in years since that 2003. But the helicopter's flying between power lines. If you're out in the canyons and in the mountains, you're flying between tight spaces. I mean, you have to be critically trained in those situations.
Yeah, so our pilots are extremely amazing. It takes 2,000 hours before they can even start training for rescue pilot. We actually have 4 rescue pilots that operate the MD-530 or the new Airbus H-145, and both of those are our rescue platforms. And yeah, where they can put those things and the maneuverability is simply amazing.
Sarah, I was talking with Chris earlier. You were talking about one blade or one runner. What's the technical talk? You were talking about when the helicopter's coming down to get somebody for a mountain rescue, you'll touch the ground, but maybe not completely?
Right, so we have different ways of insertion. The pilots will actually insert us using the Airbus H-145. Our primary insertion method is going to be hoist. We have 4 hoist operators on the 7-man team. And then we also utilize the MD-530, so we'll conduct tow-ins or one skid, which is essentially the helicopter putting one skid on a piece of terrain, and then we'll exit in that fashion.
Dude, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
You have to be incredibly talented. But talk about, like we're getting into monsoon season now, what would you tell people to avoid being one of those victims in a situation like that once we get to flash floods and heavy rains?
Yeah, so as you can see in some of the photographs and the pictures and video that are being displayed, is that water really starts running at a rapid pace. So stay out of any kind of low-lying areas, flood channels, or anything of that nature. And if you are in a rural environment on a hike or something like that, get to a piece of high terrain, and a lot of times what you'll be able to do is just wait it out. But if you are in need of assistance, like I said, if it's emergent, call 911 and let us know, and we'll do what we can to get there to you.
Wow. Justin, do we have any viewer questions or anything?
We do. We've been getting lots of viewer questions already. We actually have a couple of people who are asking about kind of why we're doing this. So Joanna and Eli and Elle Wood, they want to know, do we have some big thunderstorms in the forecast right now?
Good question.
That's a good question. You know, we've seen a real delay in the monsoon season so far. We're in the season, but we haven't had the pattern set up to bring us the thunderstorms yet. And every season can be different. So we just have to kind of wait until we see that pattern set up where that monsoon moisture pushes our way. I think we're going to get a little hint of it at the end of the week and this weekend, Nate, but no thunderstorms per se in the forecast yet. July and August, though, can be very prime thunderstorms for us.
So Larry has a question about why we get these flash floods. He says, the desert is so dry, how does it not just soak up the rain?
Has to do with the actual soil that we have here. Have you heard the term caliche?
Yes.
So the land here is actually so thick, it doesn't absorb the water. It's almost hard, yeah. So the water doesn't soak in. So that's an excellent question. Now, if you've lived here a long time, we talk about that. But if you're new to town, yeah, you would think that it rains and it'll soak into the ground. Not so much here in the Mojave Desert.
Yeah, the water hits, and it hits that hard clay, dirt soil, and it runs. And you've probably seen that with monsoons. It rains. If it rains in the mountains, that water runs all the way to the east side to find Lake Mead.
Yeah.
And that's oftentimes we'll find flash flooding, especially in canyon areas of the mountains. That can be a critical, dangerous situation.
Yeah, because it channels everything, and then gravity does its job.
Right.
Hopefully we answered your question. What else?
Yeah, Julie asks to make a prediction. Do you think monsoon season will be a little bit crazy this year due to the earthquakes that just happened? Would there be any connection?
We see no connection between earthquakes and monsoons.
Yeah.
Climate change is a real significant indicator for us, and we can see that I think we are going to have some significant storms. How many, we just can't tell at this point.
And one of the things that we've been talking about the past couple of weeks is the tropical season, how that can actually play into it, even though the classic setup for a monsoon storm is an area of high pressure kind of over the Four Corners area. But if there's a Pacific hurricane or tropical storm, some of that moisture can end up in southern Nevada.
Can give us a boost into our monsoon flow. Chris, do y'all train once we're into this part of the summer? Are y'all on alert, kind of in touch, maybe with National Weather Service, or just kind of keeping an ear to the ground for maybe a big thunderstorm day?
So yeah, that we try to train and keep our proficiency year round. So it's not only myself and my 7 team members, but we also have a dedicated volunteer force as well that assists us and is proficiently trained.
Yeah, you get one of those days where there are a lot of cars that are overwhelmed or swept away, and that can be, you need more than just a couple of people out there, right?
Yeah.
And I want folks to know that Metro police officers are people too who live here in southern Nevada along with the rest of us. I'm guessing you've been through a few floods yourself even when you weren't on duty.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No different than anybody else.
Yeah, it can be scary.
What's your impression as just a person who lives in southern Nevada? Do you pay attention to those things that we talk about that we wish more people would pay attention to?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think the one thing, especially since I've been taking this assignment, is preparedness and kind of forecasting what your activities are going to be for the day and how to prepare for them.
Yeah.
So with monsoon season approaching, I think it's important that everybody kind of pays attention to the weather, maybe a little more so than other times of the year.
See,
good advice.
You heard the sergeant. Any other
more
questions?
Yeah, Sergeant LeBlanc touched on this a little bit, but maybe he could expand how many members of the force are trained for this type of rescue, and maybe talk a little bit more about how many people are involved in that kind of line of work.
So the fire department, like I said before, handles the swiftwater stuff that you would commonly see in our flood channels throughout the city. And then we have about 15 mountain rescue and lead climb volunteers that are cross-trained in our helicopter operations that we are able to deploy on certain rescues, along with myself and my 7 team members.
Okay.
So that you got 7 guys.
7 guys, 3 on one side, 4 on the other side of the week.
Wow.
And different helicopters, right?
Yeah, we have 2 helicopters, so we have to stay proficient on both.
So we're watching the fire department right here do the swift water rescue on the ground.
Right.
But when would it become a situation where you would actually be called in to do an air rescue?
So in something, well, similar to this, let's say that the fire department wasn't able to access them because of, let's say, the environmental conditions or the water's too swift, we would send somebody down on the hoist, similar to this. If somebody is located on top of a vehicle or building or a stable structure.
Where the fire department couldn't quite get to.
Correct.
Maybe not fast enough. I see. All right.
How are we doing on the audience room? Okay.
Okay.
Can I show off my toy?
Sure, show off your toy.
I was showing this to Sergeant LeBlanc. So I was out live at the National Weather Service this morning, and folks, don't stop to think about what it takes to gather the data that you and I talk about
Right, those
every day.
predictions that we give the
Yeah.
viewers.
So I think people are familiar with satellites.
Sure.
And the photographs of the clouds rolling by. They're familiar with radar, the green blobs on the screen, and stuff like that. But Sergeant, we get to play with balloons every day.
Balloons.
So this is not the balloon itself, but this is the key component to the balloon. So hopefully you can go back on our Facebook page or on LasVegasNow.com, and we have a story about how these balloons get launched. But the idea is there's a balloon that's about 5 foot in diameter filled with helium, and this is what's hooked up to the bottom of it, and it'll rise up to 100,000 feet into the sky, so like 15 to 20 miles high. This, believe it or not, is a thermometer.
Right there.
The technical term is thermistor.
Thermistor.
And this measures the humidity. It's called a hygristor.
Oh, okay.
And inside of this that you can't see is a barometer. And there's also a radio transmitter. So as this thing rises up into the atmosphere, it's sending a steady stream of data back on wind speed, temperature, barometric pressure, which changes as the balloon rises up in the atmosphere.
Right. And on thunderstorm days, the National Weather Service, I would assume, really depends on this little instrument to give them data of what's coming and changing in the atmosphere.
For sure. So the cool thing is there's 1,300 of these going up at the same time, twice a day, all over the planet.
Wow.
So all of this data is going to computers that everybody shares, so we could see what's going on with the weather balloon in the Philippines if we cared, and vice versa.
Right.
And so it shows weather patterns, and not only does it store that data, but we can go back and look at a couple days prior to see where our weather system was, where it is now, and that's how they make some of their predictions about where weather systems are going to move. Yeah.
Interesting. I'm sure they put all that data together to kind of put the systems together and how they work together.
So
wow, interesting.
I could talk here all day, but apparently we have to move on and get on with our lives.
Well, again, Sergeant LeBlanc, we thank you for your expertise.
Oh, no
we thank you
worries.
for your time.
Thanks for having me.
And
Thanks for doing what you do, man.
maybe it'll give everybody a little insight, and the next time you get to one of those intersections that has a lot of water in it, what do you do, Nate?
Turn around, don't drown.
Right, because water always wins. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
All right, join us for the rest of the afternoon and evening on Prepping for Monsoons, and we'll be on Facebook, we'll be on Twitter, and we'll be on 8 News Now, LasVegasNow.com, and of course live on 8 News Now for all our broadcasts.